Good Morning America anchor George Stephanopoulos has called Marty Latz one of the most accomplished and persuasive negotiators I know. Founder of Latz Negotiation, a national training and consulting firm, Latz has taught over 100,000 lawyers and business professionals around the world to more effectively negotiate, was an adjunct professor of law at Arizona State University, and negotiated nationally and internationally on the White House advance teams. Author of Gain the Edge, Latz has been featured as a negotiation expert on CBS, CNN, and Fox News. Latz received his law and negotiation training at Harvard Law School, where he graduated cum laude, and was a teaching fellow at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, where one of his students was former President Barack Obama.
About 20 years ago, I was driving south on the Squaw Peak Parkway in Phoenix, which is one of the major north-south freeways going through the Phoenix area where I live, when all of a sudden I heard this horrible grinding noise coming out from my engine. Now, I had heard a similar noise literally the day after I graduated college, went to college at University of Wisconsin at Madison, and I was driving to Washington, D.C. for a job interview when literally in the middle of Ohio, I heard a similar noise, and at that point, I had to replace the engine in my car. 20 years ago, I heard this noise again, and I thought, oh no, here we go again. So I nursed the car into the nearest Nissan dealership where I'd been before, and I brought it to John. I guess they call them service consultants these days. And I said to John, okay, John, tell me what the damage is. So John listens to the noise a little bit, and he says, Marty, I tell you what, why don't we give you a ride back to your office, and I'll give you a call in about an hour and let you know what we need to do. So I say, okay, John, I get a ride back to my office. I'm practicing law at the time. And about an hour later, about 10:30 in the morning, telephone rings, answer the phone. Hello, this is Marty Latz. He says, hello, it's John at the Nissan dealership. Are you sitting down? Yes, John, I'm sitting down. Not a great way to start out this negotiation. And John says, Marty, it's going to cost you $1,900 to fix your car. Now, if this was my previous car, the car that I had when I graduated college, it would have been a very easy decision because that car wasn't even worth $1,900. But this car is worth a little bit more than $1,900. And so I ask you, from a negotiation standpoint, what's my first step? Should I simply say to John, okay, John, just fix it and call me when it's done, or should you do something else? What would you do if you were sitting in my shoes? Find out what the problem is, right? So the first thing you're going to do in this negotiation, the first thing you're going to do in any and every negotiation is get information, right? My first golden rule, information is power, so get it. So I'm going to start asking John questions. What's wrong with the car? What else is wrong with the car? What else is wrong with the car? And I'm going to basically try to find out, what is he going to do for me that will help me in this context? By the way, what is my goal in this negotiation? What am I trying to accomplish? Get it done as cheaply as possible, right? So I've got a financial goal. What other goal do I have? Actually, get it done in a quality fashion, right? So I've got a financial goal. I don't want to be back into the dealership 2, 3, 4 weeks later having the same stuff work done. So I've got a financial goal. I've got a quality goal. And I've probably got a little bit of a trust goal. I've been to John before, but after all, John does work for a car dealership. So I want to make sure that what he tells me is wrong with the car is actually wrong with the car. So I have a little bit of a trust goal as well. What other information do I want to find out from John in addition to what he tells me is wrong with the car? What are my other options, right? Do I have to get everything fixed, or can I get just a few things fixed? Perhaps not surprisingly, John tells me everything needs to be fixed. What other information do I want to find out? How long is it going to take, right? He tells me it's going to take 5 hours to fix the car. In fact, he tells me because it's going to take 5 hours to fix the car, I need to let him know by noon if I want to get the car back that day. If I tell him afternoon, he keeps it overnight. And I don't know how many of you are at all familiar with the Phoenix area, but at least at that point in time, we didn't have any significant public transportation options. And I only have one car. So John gave me a deadline of noon in this negotiation. Raise your hands if you have deadlines in your negotiations. Probably all of you, right? So I get all this information from John, what's wrong with the car, how long it's going to take. By the way, he also tells me he's giving me a 10% discount on the parts, in part because of our relationship. Have you heard this before? I'm getting a relationship discount. He also tells me he's charging me $78 an hour for labor. So I get all this information from John, what's wrong with the car, how long it's going to take. What's my next step in the negotiation? Should I say to John, just fix it and call me when it's done, or should you do something else? What would you do if you were sitting in my shoes? Get another estimate, right? So raise your hands if this was you, if you would call at least one other car repair facility. Keep your hand raised if you would call 2 or more others, 3 or more, 4 or more. Anyone? No? Well, I called 5 others. 4 other dealerships, 1 independent car repair facility, right? Get a little competitive bidding going for my business. By the way, what should I say when I call them up? Should I say, hello, my name is Marty Latz on a Nissan. It's got about 50,000 miles on it. It's over at John's dealership. John says this is wrong with the car. He tells me he'll charge me $1,900 to fix it. What will you charge? Is that what I should say? What information that I shared was too much information? I'm seeing a lot of people shaking their heads. The price, because if I tell them $1,900, what are they going to tell me? $1,800, $1,850, $1,895, they're going to give me a little bit of incentive to get it fixed there. That's not going to satisfy my financial goal. Should I tell them I'm shopping around? Yeah, absolutely tell them you're shopping around, right? I not only do I want to get John's, get them to beat John's price, but I want to get their best possible prices, and I want to create the incentive for them to give me their best possible prices. By the way, as I'm shopping around getting this competitive bidding going for my business, I'm bumping up against that noon deadline. How should I think about that noon deadline? Should I be worried about it, concerned, nervous? Big deal, small deal? You're shaking your head. How should I feel about this?
I'd be asking for a rental.
Okay, so you're already thinking, hey, if you miss the noon deadline, what do you need to do, right? Worst case scenario, rental a car, cab, you get a friend to give you a ride home. So my calculation is, as I come up to noon, is what are my alternatives if I miss it, and the value of what I am achieving if I miss it. So, how much am I saving by continuing to engage in this process relative to the potential cost if I miss the deadline? And I'm saving certainly the 30, 40, 50 bucks it would cost to rent a car, so I'm going to keep on engaging in this process. How much money do you think I'm going to save by engaging in this process? Raise your hands if you think I'm going to save $100 or more. Keep your hand raised if you think $200 or more, $300 or more, $400 or more, $500 or more. Okay, some good aggressive negotiators here. Either that or car repair facilities in this area really rip you off. Best other price I got was $1,450. $450 saved, a couple hours shopping around. By the way, is it worth my time to do this? Remember, I'm practicing law at the time. You're thinking not. Well, lawyers know how to charge for their time, by and large. And I can tell you that based strictly on a financial analysis, based on my hourly rate, based on what my clients are paying me, it is not financially worth my time to spend 3+ hours engaged in this process, except for one consideration. I love this stuff. I'm getting great enjoyment value out of working these dealers off against each other, and I'm figuring, who knows? Maybe I'll get a good negotiation story for one of my seminars. West Valley Nissan said they'll do it for $1,450. It's now about 1 o'clock. What's my next step in the negotiation? I do need to evaluate whether or not to get it towed over there. That's right. And that goes to what I'm willing to pay. But before I go to that extent, what do I want to do? I want to go back to John. Now, what do you tell John? Do you tell him $1,450? Do you tell him you can get it done cheaper elsewhere? Or tell me what you think of the following. I call John back. I say something to the effect of, John, I thought we were friends. I thought we had this good relationship. Might as well use that relationship card back up against him. I've called around just to check into the fairness and reasonableness of your price, and I can get it done for $1,200. What do you think? A little bluffing, a little puffery, good idea, bad idea? Bad idea, right? By the way, this is not bluffing, this is not puffery, this is a flat out and out lie. It's a misrepresentation, and if you did that in a significant legal or business context, you've got some fraud issues floating around out there. But beyond that, it doesn't work, because you have to figure that John has some level of knowledge, of appreciation for the value of car repair services in that market, and the danger is he says, well, $1,200? Go for it. In which case, it's actually going to cost me $1,550 to get the car fixed, $100 to get it towed, more of my time, and even I'm ready to get the process finished at this point. So now the question is, should I say $1,450, or should I simply say I can get it done cheaper elsewhere? I'm going to say $1,450. In fact, not only am I going to say $1,450, I'm going to say, hey, it's your buddy Jerry over at West Valley Nissan, and here's his telephone number if you want to check. The more detail and specificity you provide about your alternatives, about your leverage, the more likely they're going to act and react as a result of it. And then what am I going to ask John to do? Not going to ask him to match it. What am I going to ask him to do instead? Beat it. Doesn't cost me anything to ask. Fundamental negotiation point, you don't get what you don't ask for. So ask him to beat it, and he tells me the following. Tell me if you've ever heard this in any of your negotiations. He said, Marty, I would love to beat it. In fact, he said, I'd love to match it, but I can't. I just don't have the Authority. Yeah, you've heard this before? A couple thousand times, perhaps. I just don't have the authority. Let me go talk to my boss, my supervisor, my board, my constituents, my spouse, and get back to you. He goes, he talks to his boss, he comes back, he says, Marty, I can't beat it, but I can match it, which is actually better than my leverage suggests I can do. I'd be willing to pay $15.50. It's now about 1 o'clock. Am I done? What do I still want? Done by the end of the day. That raises a really interesting question. What if John now says, in fact, Marty, I can get it to you by 5? What does that now tell me about what he's been telling me the whole time? He wasn't honest about how long it was going to take. He lied to me about how long it was going to take. And if he lied to me about how long it was going to take, now my question is, did he actually lie to me about what's wrong with the car? If he actually tells me he can get it done by 5, I have to give serious consideration to actually having the car towed, having somebody else independently evaluate what's wrong with the car. Because, you know, if he tells me it's going to be done by 5, I don't know if what he told me is wrong with the car is actually wrong with the car. But he doesn't tell me he can get it done by 5. He tells me he's going to have to keep it overnight, which means I need what? A loaner car. So what do? Ask him to throw in a loaner car, right? After all, he works for a car dealership. He's got a couple of cars lying around the lot. So ask him to throw in a loaner, and what's interesting about it, what he said, was not only what he said, but when he said it. He said, Marty, we would be happy to provide you with a free loaner car. In fact, he said, it is our policy to provide free loaner cars to anyone whose repair bill exceeds $1,000. When did he tell me about this policy? After I asked. After I asked. What we just discussed goes through almost every strategic element of the negotiation process. And in fact, it's a process, as Jim mentioned in his introduction, that we've been engaging in almost our entire lives. I've got an 11-year-old. He's been negotiating for about 9.5 years now. Because when he doesn't get what he wants from his mom, what are the first words out of his mouth? Daddy, daddy. That's exactly right. But I would also suggest that we tend to negotiate instinctively or intuitively. We tend to sort of do it off the cuff. We tend to sort of wing it. Now, I'm not suggesting you don't do your homework. I'm not suggesting you don't do your due diligence. I'm not suggesting you don't learn the facts of the matters in front of you. But what I am suggesting is that we tend to negotiate instinctively or intuitively. We tend to sort of do it off the cuff, and we really don't spend the time and the effort that we should focusing on the process. Instead, we focus almost exclusively on the substance. And that's what we're going to talk about for the next 90 minutes or so. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the research on the negotiation process. And one of the things we're going to find is that there's been a lot of great research in the last 30, 40 years in this particular area. And we basically now know there is a right way to negotiate and there is a wrong way to negotiate. And I'm going to try to empower you this afternoon, not only with the knowledge of the right way to negotiate, but also to try to help us understand so when we actually go back onto the front lines, which is where you negotiate every day, you can actually put these strategies into practice within the context of a process that has an almost unlimited number of variables floating around at any given point in time. And if we actually go back and analyze that car repair negotiation, you'll see we actually went through a systematic, disciplined, step-by-step process that increases our likelihood of accomplishing our goals. Because what was the first thing we did in that negotiation? We asked questions, we got information, we set our goals. First golden rule of negotiation, information is power, so get it. What was the second thing we did in that negotiation? We called around, we shopped around, we got a little competitive bidding going for our business. Fundamental issue in negotiation, fundamental element of leverage is what are you going to do if you don't do a deal with John? What's your alternative? What's your plan B? We went through the third golden rule of negotiation, employ fair objective criteria. How do you evaluate in any negotiation what's fair or reasonable or unfair or unreasonable? I found out, for instance, in the Phoenix area that the market for car repair services and the cost for labor ranged anywhere from $55 an hour to $88 an hour. I was getting anywhere from a 5 to a 25% relationship discount on the parts. Gave me some benchmarks on which to determine what was an appropriate amount to pay for those car repair services. Third golden rule, employ fair objective criteria. We went through the fourth golden rule, design and offer concession strategy. John made a first offer. I never made a counter offer until the very end when I said, okay, let's do it. We even went through the fifth golden rule, control the agenda. John gave us that noon deadline. That was his effort to control the agenda, to limit the amount of time I could spend engaged in this process. We came up to that noon deadline. We said, not a big deal. We'll take back control of the agenda so we can talk about what we want to talk about within the context of the process. Look, as I said before, we tend to negotiate instinctively or intuitively. What we're going to do for the next little over an hour is we're going to try to shift your mindset and your behavior. Your mindset and your behavior from instinctive or intuitive to strategic based on the experts' proven research. From instinctive or intuitive to strategic based on the experts' proven research.